In recent days, an unprecedented scene has stunned Britain and the world. At 76, King Charles was seen in tears during a private meeting with the two people closest to him, Prince William and Princess Anne. According to multiple sources, this gathering was not a routine family discussion. It was a cold and uncompromising ultimatum, demanding that the king sever all financial support and official ties with Queen Camilla's family. In that moment, Charles's tears were not only the sorrow of a man trapped between family and duty, but also a sign that the royal power struggle had entered a brutal new phase. Observers believe William and Anne's decision reflects more than just personal discontent with Camilla and her relatives. It forms part of a broader plan to restructure the monarchy. After years of upheaval, from the passing of Queen Elizabeth II to the crises surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan, the British royal family faces mounting pressure to streamline, restore transparency, and rebuild public trust. Within this picture, Camilla's family appears less an asset than a liability. Whispers of meddling, privilege-taking, and even accusations of appropriating heritage have steadily eroded their standing, turning them into a source of controversy. But if this were only about restructuring, it would not have cut so deeply into the king's heart. What wounded Charles most was the fact that William and Anne stood united in making this severe demand. One is the heir to the throne, the symbol of the future, the other his only daughter, a symbol of loyalty to tradition. When both spoke with one voice, it was nothing less than a silent rejection of Camilla and her family. It left a deep fracture within the royal household, where affection, honor, and power are entangled in ways almost impossible to untangle. The pressing question now is, why did William and Anne choose such a drastic move at a time when Charles most needs unity? Is this a direct blow to Camilla's credibility, or a warning that the throne can only endure if built on transparency and untainted legacy? More importantly, which path will Charles choose? To protect the wife who has stood by him for decades, or to heed the voices of his son and sister to safeguard the monarchy's survival? His tears may well be the signal that, whatever path he takes, the British throne is bracing for an unprecedented shock. Just days after the tearful confrontation between King Charles, Prince William, and Princess Anne, Buckingham Palace released a brief but weighty statement. In an official communique, the palace confirmed that restructuring the royal trust was part of a strategy to ensure the monarchy's long-term integrity. The language was carefully chosen, cold, and stripped of emotion. Yet beneath it lay a decisive message. This was not merely a financial adjustment, but a clear step toward cutting away what was seen as excessive or contentious within the royal apparatus. What caught the eye of observers was not what was written, but what was left unsaid. Throughout the entire statement, there was no mention of Laura Lopes or Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's two children. That silence spoke louder than any confirmation. In royal tradition, when names are omitted from a communique, it signals they are firmly outside the circle of privilege, absent from the monarchy's long-term vision. For those who believe Camilla might skillfully weave her children into the royal fabric, this omission was nothing short of a crushing blow. The exclusion of Laura and Tom cannot be dismissed as an administrative oversight. Buckingham Palace is renowned for its precision in public statements. Every word, every punctuation mark is carefully vetted to avoid misinterpretation. Thus, their absence was an implicit confirmation. They had been pushed out of the sphere of influence. The message was unambiguous. The legacy of Queen Elizabeth II and the monarchy's image in the eyes of the public will not be diluted by those outside the direct Windsor bloodline. Commentators have described this as a harsh but necessary decision. With the monarchy under growing pressure to be transparent and cut wins, any appearance of peripheral figures, especially Camilla's family, risks igniting public backlash. The public has long voiced frustration at non-royal bloodlines benefiting from the royal name. The palace's choice to quietly exclude them rather than announce it openly only underscores the sensitivity of the matter. It is at once firm and cautious, almost a warning that the monarchy's patience has reached its limit. Looking deeper, some see this as King Charles bowing to pressure from William and Anne. When the two stood together with their ultimatum, restructuring the trusts became the only path left for the king to retain a measure of control. Rather than a direct confrontation, Charles chose to frame it as an administrative reform, masking the painful reality that Camilla's family is slowly being pushed to the margins, despite his attempts to shield them. And it was precisely the silence surrounding Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles that turned the palace statement into a flashpoint of controversy. Questions immediately arose. Was this change truly about long-term integrity, as the communique suggested? Or was it the outcome of a bruising internal battle where power and legacy were weighed against one another? Was this the moment Charles finally picked a side, or merely a temporary step to soothe widening fractures within the royal household? And most crucially, what really prompted such a bold move? Within hours of the announcement, a storm of reaction erupted across media and social networks. Headlines in both British and international outlets, from the Times to the New York Times, all carried the same refrain. King Charles had finally taken a hard step to protect the monarchy's legacy, particularly the values bound to Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Diana. It quickly became one of the most hotly debated topics of the day, dominating talk shows, news panels, and online forums alike. On social media, hundreds of thousands of comments flooded Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with overwhelming public approval. One phrase went viral above all others: "It's time to clean house at the palace." The slogan captured not only public satisfaction with the decision, but also long-standing resentment over what many saw as the misuse of privilege by Camilla's family. To many users, this was a long overdue punishment, a cleansing of shadows that had clung to the monarchy's image through decades of turbulence. Another phrase spread like wildfire: "Diana would be proud." Short yet deeply charged, it carried a weight of memory, not only recalling the late Princess of Wales, but evoking the pain she endured in the love triangle between Charles, Diana, and Camilla. For many, the quiet sidelining of Camilla's family felt like more than financial housekeeping. It was a measure of justice for Diana at last. It was a rewriting of history in the direction the public had always longed for, preserving the honor of a woman who became a global symbol of compassion. Television pundits also stressed that this wave of support did not materialize overnight. In truth, it reflects years of public discontent toward Camilla's family, long seen as outsiders, enjoying royal privileges without legitimacy. For years, the presence of Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles at major events, sometimes afforded precedence over Windsor blood relatives, had sparked irritation. To the British public, deeply wedded to the idea of tradition and legitimacy, it was an unacceptable abuse of privilege. The palace's silent removal of Camilla's family from the trusts is therefore seen as a direct response to that discontent. For the public, it represents more than financial strategy. It is a reaffirmation that the monarchy still prioritizes the legacies of Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana. And so, rather than fueling division, the move has temporarily restored to Charles a surge of popular support, something rare in his tumultuous first years on the throne. However, this wave of support also exposes a bitter paradox. The public may praise Charles for his decisive action, but at the same time, they quietly acknowledge that the root of the problem lies in his own choices of the past. And now, and his headlines echo with the sentiment, "Diana would be proud." Is that not also a reminder that the late princess's shadow still looms over the British throne, perhaps even more powerfully than any effort Camilla has ever made to win acceptance? Inside the royal family, discontent over Camilla gradually ushering her two children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles, into royal life has simmered for years. At first, it was tolerated as an inevitable compromise, a step meant to soften Camilla's image as she stepped into the role of queen. Yet over time, what began as limited appearances at family functions slowly evolved into a conspicuous presence at state occasions. For many members of the Windsor clan, this was not merely a matter of family dynamics. It was a threat to the very essence of royal tradition, a tradition built on direct bloodline and the strict legitimacy of the crown. In private conversations, several royal advisors have voiced concern that Laura and Tom's increasingly prominent seating at major events, at times even placed on par with blood relatives of the Windsors, set a dangerous precedent. It blurred the fragile line between private family and royal family, a line already under strain since the day Camilla entered the palace. Particularly troubling was the way their images began to flood the press, prompting the public to ask, what exactly is their role in the monarchy's structure? And more importantly, was this part of a deliberate strategy to secure Camilla's position, not only for herself but for her children and grandchildren? Prince William, as heir to the throne, is said to be increasingly unsettled by the long-term implications. To him, Laura and Tom's rising visibility does more than complicate the royal family's public image. It encroaches directly on the legacy of his mother, Princess Diana. In William's eyes, the monarchy cannot allow an outsider family to claim the spotlight that rightfully belongs to Diana and her legitimate heirs. Every time the press juxtaposes Laura and Tom against William and Harry, it is not merely a question of optics. It is a personal wound, as if Diana's memory were being overshadowed by names that never belonged to Windsor blood. The tension has been most apparent during events commemorating Diana. On more than one occasion, the public has noticed Laura and Tom present behind the scenes, as though they held a legitimate role in ceremonies meant to honor Diana's memory and her two sons. William, usually restrained in temperament, rarely lets his frustration show, but those close to him reveal he has privately voiced displeasure, not only to advisors, but even to his father, King Charles. Behind it all lies an undeniable truth. Integrating Laura and Tom into royal life is not merely sharing the stage, it is symbolic. It raises the question of where the boundaries of royal tradition truly lie, and who has the right to claim those sacred privileges. For William, every step forward taken by Laura and Tom is another crack in the wall protecting Diana's legacy, a reminder that Camilla and her family have never truly loosened their grip on the throne, and in fact weigh more heavily than ever on his path to succession. Will this discontent remain as whispers in palace corridors, or will it erupt into open confrontation between William, the guardian of Diana's legacy, and Camilla, determined to cement her family's place in royal history? From private gatherings within the royal family to high-profile national ceremonies, Camilla's imprint on slowly embedding Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles into royal life has become too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. At every turn, she has orchestrated their presence with a subtle precision, leaving both the public and the royal household with the impression that Laura and Tom naturally belong within the realm of power, as if they had always been an integral part of the palace's structure. But on closer inspection, it is clear this is not mere family integration, but a calculated strategy, a long-term plan by Camilla to ensure her children are not sidelined, but firmly woven into the royal legacy. Laura, once a discreet figure working quietly as an art curator, has begun appearing more frequently at high-ranking events where she had never before been seen. From royal family anniversaries and Buckingham Palace charity galas to grand ceremonies tied to Britain's ancient traditions, Laura is now consistently seated within the honorary sections. Her presence is not just accompanying her mother, it is staged for the public and press to see her as a familiar figure, sometimes even photographed alongside senior royals. Through this steady repetition, a psychological effect takes hold. Little by little, the public begins to accept Laura's presence as something natural. Tom Parker Bowles, by contrast, may not appear frequently on the public stage, yet he enjoys privileges that have raised more than a few eyebrows. He has access to areas long regarded as off-limits to outsiders, such as private meeting rooms or sections reserved exclusively for senior royals. Some sources have even suggested that Tom has on several occasions been present during strategic palace discussions, under the pretext of advising on communications and cuisine, his professional field. But what has captured public attention is not the justification, but the fact itself. Tom, who holds no official role within the monarchy, is nevertheless able to cross thresholds reserved only for those born into Windsor blood. When these two pieces are put together, Laura with her growing public visibility and Tom with his discreet access, a clear picture begins to emerge. Camilla has been quietly laying the groundwork for a secure position for her children. She understands that in a closed system like the British monarchy, familiarity is power. The more frequently Laura and Tom appear, the more relationships they build within the family, the harder it becomes to remove them from the orbit of royal influence. This cannot help but unsettle William and other senior royals. On the surface, the presence of Laura and Tom may be framed as family unity, but beneath that lies a deeper risk. If the public grows accustomed to seeing them at royal events, might they one day be perceived as spiritual heirs alongside true princes and princesses? For William, this is unthinkable, not only for the sake of Diana's legacy, but also for the purity and legitimacy of the Windsor throne. Observers have also pointed out the striking similarities between Camilla's current strategy for her children and the way she once cemented her own role beside Charles. What began as faint, careful appearances slowly gave way to more frequent outings, then to shared spotlight moments, until finally her position became undeniable. Now, it seems, she is applying the very same playbook to Laura and Tom, step by step, quietly but with unshakable determination. What is particularly striking is that while many within the royal family maintain silence to avoid open conflict, the public has grown increasingly sensitive to these shifts. Photographs of Laura at high-level events are frequently met with sharp remarks. Why is she there? Or, this is not Diana's legacy. Such reactions reflect a long-standing frustration that the roles meant for Diana and her sons are being diluted by names with no royal bloodline. The question is no longer whether Camilla is deliberately inserting her children into royal life, but rather how far will this strategy go? And as Laura and Tom's presence becomes harder to ignore, can the monarchy maintain its sacred boundaries? Or will it face yet another crisis of legitimacy? One reminiscent of the turmoil that engulfed the institution when Camilla first entered the palace. In recent days, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace has been described as stifling, marked by tense private meetings between senior members of the family. At the center of these discussions is Prince William, who is no longer as restrained as he once was. In one private exchange, William is said to have confronted King Charles directly, expressing in no uncertain terms his objection to the gradual integration of Camilla's family, particularly Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles, into royal functions. No longer hinting obliquely, William put into words what the public has long whispered. The growing prominence of Laura and Tom threatens to overshadow the traditional identity of the monarchy and cuts deep into an unhealed wound, the shadow of Princess Diana. During the conversation, William reportedly grew visibly emotional when speaking of his mother. He hinted that if Diana were alive, she would never have accepted a reality in which Camilla's family stood on equal footing with the legitimate heirs. Diana had fought to secure her son's rightful place within the monarchy, and now William feels that burden has fallen squarely on his shoulders. His words, "Mother would never have agreed," are said to have cast such a heavy silence over the room that the conversation could barely continue. For King Charles, this was more than a debate about roles or protocol. Behind every one of William's words lay a direct challenge to the personal choices he has made throughout his life. Camilla is not only his current wife, but the love he steadfastly defended in the face of decades of public opposition. And so, when William confronted him openly, Charles was forced into an agonizing dilemma. On one side, his love and loyalty to Camilla; on the other, his duty as sovereign to safeguard the purity and legacy of the monarchy itself. The tension did not come from words alone, but from the heavy silence that stretched between father and son. At times, silence can cut sharper than argument. William fixed his gaze on Charles, waiting for a decisive answer, while Charles lowered his eyes, trapped between two worlds. On one side, his heart; on the other, the crown upon his head. Those present described the scene as a historic confrontation, a moment when the distance between king and heir seemed wider than ever before. The fallout from these encounters has been a widening fracture in their relationship. William, already burdened with the responsibility of preparing for his future role, now faces the prospect that the legacy he strives to protect could be diluted by a family history riddled with controversy. Charles, though still yearning for harmony, can no longer deny that his personal choices are pushing the monarchy toward an identity crisis. The public, upon hearing these accounts, instantly evoked the image of Princess Diana, the woman once cast aside so that Camilla could step into the center. Now, through William's voice, Diana's memory has been carried back into the halls of power. To many, this makes him not merely a prince, but a devoted son guarding the legacy of his mother. Yet one question hangs thick in the air. Whose side will Charles ultimately take in this clash? Will he defend Camilla and her family, continuing the battle he has spent a lifetime fighting? Or will he heed his son's plea, safeguarding the monarchy's integrity and Diana's memory? Whatever the answer, it will shape not only the future of the royal family, but the very destiny of the British crown. Into this storm has stepped Princess Anne, long known as the quiet, dutiful figure who avoids palace drama, now emerging as a silent warrior for the monarchy. For years, she maintained neutrality, placing stability above conflict. But witnessing William confront Charles and seeing Camilla's increasingly brazen efforts to weave her family into the monarchy's core, Anne could no longer remain a bystander. To her, this was no longer a family quarrel, but a grave threat to Queen Elizabeth's legacy and the honor of the crown. In a private audience with Charles, Anne is said to have shown a side of herself rarely seen. She spoke without evasion or restraint, demanding that the king act to protect tradition. With calm yet cutting authority, she warned that if Charles continued to allow Camilla to manipulate affairs, history would judge him harshly, not as a reformer, but as the monarch who betrayed his mother's legacy. Mother dedicated her life to keeping the crown untainted. You cannot be the one to let it be stained, she declared. Words that, according to one account, plunged the room into a suffocating silence. Anne's role in this chapter has become pivotal. She is not only the king's sister, but a living emblem of absolute loyalty to Queen Elizabeth. Throughout her life, she has shunned the spotlight, yet she has always understood the value of stability and tradition more deeply than most. That is why her shift from neutrality to fierce resistance has shocked many, and at the same time reassured those who see her as a shield defending the Queen's legacy. One of Anne's boldest moves was her reported decision to refuse participation in any royal events attended by Camilla's family. This was more than a personal protest. It was a symbol of defiance. Anne, famed for her unshakable sense of duty, has never shirked her obligations, no matter how minor. Her absence, therefore, would speak louder than words, a clear signal to the public and the press that the monarchy is fractured, and that the source of the rupture lies in Camilla's contested presence and that of her children. Analysts now suggest that Anne has stepped out of the shadow of neutrality to become a central figure in this quiet but ferocious war. If William embodies the new generation in the memory of Diana, Anne is the voice of tradition, of the resilience Queen Elizabeth forged over 7 decades. Different in approach, but united in purpose, they now stand side by side, determined to defend the throne from forces they see as foreign intrusions. For Charles, the burden is now crushing. He faces not only the pressure of his son, but also the weight of his sister's stern opposition, a sister he knows acts with deliberation, never impulse. Every word Anne utters carries the weight of history, and her unwavering stance has only deepened the torment tearing at the king's soul. Anne's emergence as a counterweight transformed the royal crisis from a personal quarrel into a three-sided battle, where every decision carried the risk of reshaping the monarchy's image in the eyes of the public and in the pages of history. And amid all these forces, the most striking element was the powerful shift of Princess Anne, once a distant observer, now a steadfast warrior, prepared to confront her own brother in defense of Queen Elizabeth's legacy. One quiet evening at Clarence's house, after days of relentless scrutiny from both the public and the family, Camilla sought out Charles for a private conversation. Gone was the sharp, steely exterior she usually displayed. Instead, she appeared exhausted, her eyes red as though she had just weathered an emotional storm. Before the king, Camilla did not speak with the voice of a queen, but with that of a wife, a mother desperately pleading for the protection of her children. Charles, you must understand, Laura and Tom are not seeking power. They only want a place here, a sense that they belong, she said, her voice breaking, her hand gripping his arm. For Camilla, the exclusion of Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles was not merely an official decision, but a sign that history itself was rejecting her family's existence. Beneath her plea lay a deep-seated fear that with the passing of time, she would forever be remembered as an interloper, a woman who forced her way into the royal family but never truly became part of it. She confessed this insecurity, telling Charles that if the decision stood, it would not only destroy the image she had spent decades trying to build, but also shatter her family. You may bear it when history judges me, but I cannot allow my children to be hurt, she cried, revealing a rare moment of vulnerability. Charles listened, his shoulders heavy, his face etched with torment. He understood Camilla's position, for he himself had spent a lifetime enduring the public's skeptical gaze, from the earliest days of their scandal into the moment he ascended the throne. He knew too well what it meant to be seen as an outsider, and so Camilla's words touched a private wound within him. Yet this was different. Upon Charles now rested not only his love for Camilla, but the duty to safeguard the monarchy's integrity and legitimacy. Public pressure was mounting. The voices praising William and Anne rang out across the media, while anger surged against Camilla's family. His closest advisors warned repeatedly that any concession to Laura or Tom would unravel the monarchy's carefully rebuilt image and cast him as a weak king swayed by private sentiment. In that moment, Charles was a man torn in two. On one side stood Camilla, the companion who had weathered scandal, hatred, and years of life in the shadows with him. On the other stood William, Anne, and the shadows of Diana and Queen Elizabeth, symbols of tradition, memory, and everything Britain was determined not to lose. It is said Charles wept during that meeting. Not the tears of a king, but of a husband and stepfather watching his family pushed to the margins. He clutched Camilla's hand, searching for words of comfort, but deep down he knew he could not overturn the decision. The harsh truth was that the throne and the public would never allow him to follow the call of his heart. The meeting ended in silence. Camilla left the room with heavy steps, while Charles remained seated, his blurred gaze fixed upon the portrait of Queen Elizabeth hanging on the wall. One question lingered in his mind and in the minds of millions. Could Charles's love for Camilla withstand the crushing weight of the monarchy and public opinion, or would it too be ground beneath the wheels of history? Princess Anne and Queen Camilla continued to weave a tapestry of conflict and tears. After that painful private encounter, where Camilla pleaded for her children's place, one haunting question remained. Could Charles's love for her survive the combined force of family opposition and public outrage? This was no longer just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of the monarchy's eternal paradox, where every choice can alter history, and where the human heart is constantly tested by royal duty. Here we see a king with weary eyes, torn between love and responsibility, a husband desperate to shield the woman he pursued for a lifetime, yet facing fierce resistance from his son and sister, and above all, a Camilla terrified that history will forever brand her as an outsider, despite all her years of striving to belong at Charles's side. Whether told through official statements or silent glances, This story continues to divide and ignite global opinion. This is the monarchy's age-old paradox. Human beings with emotions and desires, trapped within the iron framework of tradition and the relentless scrutiny of millions. No path is free of wounds, and every decision cuts deep into those bound to it. Will Charles dare defy William and Anne to preserve his love, or will he be forced to sacrifice it for the sake of stability? The answer lies ahead, and it will shape the monarchy's image for years to come. One thing, however, is certain. This story is far from over, and it will continue to shake the world for a long time yet. And you, what do you think? Can love truly survive such pressure and prejudice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so we can keep uncovering the untold truths of the British royal family. Because behind the dazzling facade, there are always stories that leave the world breathless.